Welcome back to your channel Leo Storyland. Here we uncover a real Reddit story. If you liked my video, please like, share, subscribe. My name is Everly and I'm 35 years old. For 4 years, my parents told everyone I disappeared after I stopped sending money home. That's the story they built, the one they repeated at family dinners, church gatherings, and every relative's phone call that asked about me. Disappeared. Like I was fog that had simply lifted one morning and never came back. The truth was simpler and uglier than that. I had stopped answering their calls because I finally understood what those calls always meant. Every single one started with warmth and ended with a request for money. Rent, medical bills, my younger brother's tuition, my father's failed business ventures. There was always a reason, always an emergency, always me expected to fix it because I was the one who left home first and made something of myself in the city. For 12 years, I sent a portion of every paycheck home. I told myself it was love. It took me a long time to realize it was fear dressed up as loyalty. The breaking point came the year I lost my job in a corporate downsizing and had nothing left to give. I called my mother to explain, expecting understanding, maybe even concern for how I was doing. Instead, she asked how they were supposed to pay the electric bill. Not one question about whether I was okay. Not one word about my own struggle. That phone call ended something in me that had been fraying for years. I stopped calling. I stopped answering. And within months, I heard through a cousin that my parents had started telling people I'd vanished, gone no contact for no reason, an ungrateful daughter who'd abandoned her family in their time of need. It was easier for them to be victims of my disappearance than to admit they had drained me until there was nothing left to drain. I moved twice in those 4 years. Each time a little further from the reach of anyone who might come looking. I rebuilt my life carefully and quietly. I found new work in logistics management, modest but steady. I found a small circle of friends who didn't need anything from me except my company. I found a small house with a blue door that I painted myself on a Sunday afternoon, and for the first time in my adult life, that house felt like it was mine and only mine. No obligations waiting behind the front door. No emergencies disguised as love. Just quiet. Then they sent my sister to find where I lived. I didn't know it at the time, but my sister Ren had been asking around for months, piecing together fragments from old mutual friends, a former coworker who mentioned a city, a delivery receipt my mother had somehow gotten hold of. My parents wanted proof. Not proof that I was alive and well. They didn't care about that. They wanted proof of my address so they could reopen the pipeline they'd lost. My mother's exact instruction to Ren, as I'd later learn, was simple. Find her door, take a picture, and send it home. Not knock, not talk. Just document it like evidence in a case file. That was how much I mattered to them. A location to be logged. It was a Thursday evening in early autumn when I heard footsteps on my porch. I looked through the window and saw a woman standing there holding up her phone, angling it toward my front door like she was framing a photograph. It took me a full 3 seconds to recognize her. My sister, older, her hair cut shorter than I remembered, but unmistakably her. My heart did something strange in my chest, something between longing and dread. Without thinking, I opened the door. She lowered her phone slowly. Her mouth open, but no words came out at first. I watched the color drain from her face in real time, watched her eyes move from my face to the doorframe behind me, to the porch light I'd installed myself, to the welcome mat with my initials stitched into the corner. This was not a stranger's house she'd stumbled upon. This was undeniably, unmistakably me, standing very much alive in front of her. She knocked, looked past me, and went pale. She took one step back, then another, her sneakers scraping against my porch steps as she retreated down them without ever taking her eyes off me. I called her name, but she didn't answer. She backed down the steps, phone already at her ear, her voice shaking as she said the words that would change everything that came after. "Mom, you need to see this. It's not what you." Her voice cracked and cut off as she turned and hurried toward her car, leaving me standing in my own doorway stunned, my hands still on the frame of the door I had painted blue with my own 2 hands. I stood there long after her car pulled away, trying to understand what I had just witnessed. Because the look on my sister's face wasn't the look of someone who'd found a runaway. It was the look of someone who'd just seen a ghost. I didn't move for a long time after Ren's car disappeared down the street. Her words kept looping in my mind. Mom, you need to see this. It's not what was it not? What had my mother told her that made seeing me alive look so impossible, so wrong, that my own sister's face had drained of color like she'd witnessed something that shouldn't exist? I went back inside, locked the door out of habit more than fear, and sat with my phone in my hands for almost an hour before I worked up the nerve to call her back. She picked up on the first ring, her voice still trembling. "Everly," she said, like she was testing whether the name would summon me or dissolve me. "You're really alive." I told her of course I was alive. I'd been alive this whole time, living an ordinary life 2 states away. There was a long silence, and then she said something that changed the entire shape of the last 4 years. She told me that 18 months ago, our mother had told the entire extended family, the neighbors, even people at her church, that I had died. Not disappeared, died. A car accident out of state, no body available for a funeral because I'd supposedly been cremated far from home, a tragedy too painful for my mother to discuss in detail. Wren had grown up these past 18 months believing she'd lost her older sister. She'd cried at a memorial gathering held in our backyard, a small table with my photograph and a candle that my mother lit every Sunday. I sat with the phone against my ear, unable to speak for a moment. The disappearance story had apparently stopped being useful to my mother once people started asking too many uncomfortable questions, like why the police weren't involved, why no one had filed a missing persons report. Death was cleaner. Death didn't invite investigation. Death gave her sympathy instead of suspicion, casseroles instead of judgment, and most importantly, it closed the door on anyone ever expecting to see me walk through it again. My mother had killed me on paper because it was easier than admitting her own daughter had simply chosen peace over her. Wren explained that our parents had never fully let go of the idea that I might still be sending money somewhere, might have a bank account or a new job they could somehow leverage if they found me. That's why she'd been asked to search. Not for closure, not out of love, but because a woman going through my abandoned belongings had found an old pay stub, and my father, ever practical about his losses, wondered if his supposedly dead daughter might still be a source of income if she could be located and quietly reconciled with, away from the story they'd already told everyone else. Wren had agreed to look, thinking she was chasing a paper trail that would lead nowhere, never once expecting to find me standing very much alive behind a blue door with a welcome mat bearing my initials. I asked her the question that mattered most. Did she tell them yet? She said no. She'd hung up on our mother mid-sentence in the driveway, unable to process the collision between the story she'd mourned and the woman standing in front of her. She said she needed time to think about what our parents had done, not just to me, but to her, to everyone who'd cried at that candlelit table for a person who was never gone. I told her she could take all the time she needed, and that my door, unlike theirs, would always be open to her specifically, because she was the only one who'd actually come looking for me as a person, not as a source of money. We talked for 3 more hours that night.
She told me about the years I'd missed, the small griefs and small joys of a family that had built its peace on a lie. I told her about the house, the blue door, the life I'd built from nothing after I stopped mistaking obligation for love. By the end of the call, something had shifted between us, something honest for the first time in longer than either of us could remember. In the weeks that followed, Wren made a choice of her own. She didn't expose our parents publicly, and she didn't demand an apology that would never come sincerely. Instead, she simply stepped back from the role they'd assigned her, the messenger, the searcher, the daughter who fixed things for people who never once asked what she needed. She started visiting me instead, first hesitantly, then often, sitting on my porch steps in the evenings while I watered the small garden I'd planted along the fence. My parents never came looking again. Perhaps they finally understood that some doors, once closed on your own terms, don't reopen just because the lie behind them stopped being convenient. I think about that autumn evening often, the way Wren's face went pale, the way her voice cracked over the phone, the strange mercy of being mistaken for dead by people who never truly knew me alive. It taught me that the family you choose to protect your peace with will always matter more than the one that only remembers you when they need something.